Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another episode of Galactic Versus, the series where we do huge versus matchups, sometimes in-universe, sometimes between universes, and today it is the ladder, and specifically we are looking at the Tau Empire from Warhammer 40k and the Covenant from, of course, Halo. So we're going to be pitting these two factions head-to-head to try to see which one would come out on top in an all-out war, and this matchup is kind of interesting for a couple of reasons. The first is that both factions are kind of based on and rely on absorbing alien species, and of course they are led by hierarchs. Also, the Tau symbol is almost identical to Bungie's Marathon symbol, which appears throughout the various Halo games. So the backdrop for today's matchup is going to be that the Tau Empire and the Covenant Empire somehow appear next to each other in the same galaxy, and the last one standing will be the victor today. If you don't know about the Tau or the Covenant, do not worry, I'll give an overview of both before the actual matchup. I'm going to say that I will focus on the Tau because I've only actually featured Warhammer 40k one other time in this series and never the Tau Empire, and the Covenant is pretty heavily featured and has been featured in a few different videos. So on that note, what is the Tau? Well, just for some clarification, there's the Tau Empire and then there's the Tau race. The Tau race and the Tau Empire are not the same thing, although the Empire is largely comprised of the Tau race. The Tau have advanced very quickly to achieve their status as a spacefaring race within the Warhammer 40k universe. The Tau Empire was still in the Stone Age only 6,000 years before the current events of the Warhammer 40k universe. That would be notable in our universe, and in the Warhammer universe where empires exist for tens of thousands of years, that is extra notable. I'm not going to look at the physiological or societal aspects of the Tau because it's not really relevant to this video, but you probably should know that they do operate within a caste system and are controlled by the Ethereals. The Ethereals are the most powerful caste within the Tau and control all others, including the Fire Caste, who are primarily responsible for warfare. Each of these castes evolved quite differently, and they're almost at this point like several subspecies. Again, not necessarily relevant for this video, but I'm sure if you want to learn more, you can find more on YouTube. The Tau are considered one of the more quote-unquote good races within the 40k universe. They're certainly not as grim or dark or even murdery as some of the other ones. This has, however, been changing in the fiction, largely due to fan reaction, and the Tau have been getting some darker aspects with references to them being controlled by the Ethereals, forced service to the Empire, etc., etc. The Tau Empire generally operates behind the philosophical principle of the greater good. That means that everything that they do should be meant to improve their society again. This isn't really in line with what we see in the rest of Warhammer 40k. That's just a general description of the Tau Empire and the principle of the greater good, but I think it's enough for you guys to understand this video if you didn't already know the Tau. So let's talk more specifically about the Empire right now. I mentioned that the Tau is not just a race, but also the Empire. The Empire is made up of not only the Tau species, but several others, including, most relevantly I think, the Kroot and humans. The Tau, as I mentioned, are relatively new to the 40k universe, and unlike races like the Imperium, are actually in a period of growth and technological innovation. Much of the Tau's prosperity comes from the fact that they actually exist within a very small fraction of the 40k universe, haven't really been involved in galaxy-wide warfare to the same scale as some of the other larger factions. The Empire is spread across 20 fully populated star systems known as seps, as well as various outposts, stations, and colonies. It's hard to guess exactly how large the Empire is, how many planets they had, and their exact population, but the Tau likely had dozens to hundreds of heavily colonized planets, with a population most likely in the billions to trillions. Tau's in-universe expansion is limited not only by other factions, but also by the Tau's lack of psychers. The Tau are unable to operate within the warp and have very slow, faster than light speeds, even by Warhammer 40k standards. The Empire, because of its small size and rapid technological innovation, uses heavily automation and things like artificial intelligence. Militarily, the Tau are very strategic, they like decisive victories, and they use every bit of their collective member species in the way that is most effective. The Tau are kind of like the opposite of the Imperium in that regards. they can't fight wars of attrition, and their units are highly valuable and highly efficient. They haven't really fought any large-scale wars to the same extent that the Imperium or the other factions have, but they still have shown an ability to fight the Imperium of Man at least when necessary, although only small forces. On the ground, the Tau rely fairly heavily on their fire caste and their use of combat suits and very powerful long-range pulse weapons. This weaponry is very powerful. It can operate in the kilometer range and is even strong enough to take down a Space Marine, which, if you watch my other 40k universe video, you know is very difficult. Perhaps the most notable part of the Tau army is their battle suits. These basically make the wearer impervious to anything dangerous while projecting a massive amount of force, and the largest of these battle suits, because they do vary in size, is powerful enough to hold an entire planet basically by itself. In space, the Tau Empire uses similar technologies, with ships focusing on railguns and similar weaponry including ion cannons. And again, Tau ships have taken on small Imperium fleets before, although I do not think they are up to the same technological standard. They are very advanced scientifically, but the Empire just has so many resources, its ships are so big and so powerful that it's kind of hard to compare the two. Again though, the biggest weakness of the Tau, especially their navy, is that Tau are not sensitive to the warp and do not have advanced faster than light technologies, and we'll talk about this more later on as we get to the actual battle, but just try to keep that in mind. So let's now talk about the Covenant, and I'm gonna go very basic here because I'm sure that many of you, if not most of you, are probably familiar with them, and if you're not, you can check out some of my past videos because I've featured them multiple times now. The Covenant were a major faction within the Halo universe, which controlled a large portion of the Milky Way galaxy. Like the Tau, they were made up of several species, in the Covenant's case at least 8, and were controlled by one specific faction. In the Covenant's case, that was the Sanshum, also known as the Prophets. I'd wager quite confidently that the Covenant Empire was substantially larger than the Tau. They most likely controlled hundreds, if not 1,000 or so worlds, with a population in the high billions, low trillions. On the ground, the Covenant are comparatively weak against the Tau, and I think they will really struggle against the armor that many Tau soldiers would actually have. I think really the only weapons that will be effective against them will be the fuel rod cannons carried either by hunters or by individual soldiers, although these are not common weapons. I'll get to this more formally in just a second. I will say though that while the technology, at least the ground-based warrior technology that the Covenant possessed, wasn't as strong as the Tau, I think that their fighters were very impressive, especially elites and their command of other forces. In space, the Covenant Empire was also very mighty, with thousands of warships at their disposal, most of which were capable of glassing a planet. This is a tremendous amount of power, and one that was routinely displayed by Covenant forces. The Covenant Empire, due to its size and the devotion of each one of its soldiers, is also fairly comfortable taking losses on both the ground and in space. The Covenant also have very good, or when compared to the Warhammer universe, phenomenal faster than light travel abilities, and this technology is known as Slipspace. Tech-wise, Slipspace may not be as good as, say, the hyperdrive from Star Wars, but it's still well and above anything offered in the 40k universe without any of the difficulties of actually going through the warp. So with this basic understanding of the two factions, let us now go through the actual matchup itself. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I think that this is an interesting one. We have the Tau, who in my mind are probably more technologically advanced, certainly more so on the ground, compared to the Covenant, who controlled a large portion of the galaxy and have a lot of resources at their disposal. The Covenant are also able to use these resources very effectively and efficiently because they have access to very powerful faster than light technology. Generally, the 40k universe is more powerful than the Halo universe. However, the Tau are arguably one of the weakest, if not the weakest, major factions within 40k. I know some 40k fans are very protective of the power of their universe, so some of you may not be happy with how I'm deciding this matchup. I think it'd be more interesting if the Covenant Empire and the Tau Empire were the same size. But if we look at an actual map, we see that the Tau controls only a very small portion of space, while the Covenant, who is heavily industrialized, controls a whole arm of the galaxy. Any battle that the two factions fight on the ground will invariably go to the Tau. They are much more powerful, their weapons are incredibly effective, and as I mentioned, the only real weapons that the Covenant can likely use to harm them would be a fuel rod cannon. In-atmosphere vehicles will also go to the Tau, and when we get to space, things start to get a little bit more interesting. One-on-one, I think a Tau ship would probably take most Covenant ships. It uses, kind of like the UNSC does, projectile-based weapons which are incredibly effective. A CAS, or obviously a CSO, would probably have a lot better luck, but when we're talking about the routine CCS class cruisers, I think it's going to go pretty easily to the Tau most times. However, we're dealing with a case where the two galaxies are pushed next to each other and we have an all-out war. The Covenant has access to, at least in my opinion, a lot more ships, and with their very efficient faster-than-light technology, they should be able to marshal many of these ships for battles again and again and again. The Tau are very strategic and tactically minded, but they start off with a huge disadvantage, not being able to move very quickly. Unlike the Imperium, which won against the Star Wars universe, the Tau can't just throw space marines or throw resources at the problem. They're going to have to selectively choose which worlds to defend, and are going to have a very, very difficult time actually attacking Covenant worlds, because the Covenant will always be able to respond very, very quickly. On the flip side, I think the Covenant will really struggle with any incursions into Tau space, so it might be a bit of a stalemate for a while. That being said, we know that the Covenant have vast numbers. On the other hand, we know that the Tau Empire only has a dozen to 100 worlds. The Covenant are very good at completely destroying worlds, dismantling an empire, and I truly think that especially with their Slipspace abilities, that's what will happen in this matchup. So yes, I'm gonna give this battle to the Covenant Empire, which I think will surprise a lot of the people who clicked on this video. When people see 40k, they always assume that they're gonna win, and it makes sense because it's a very powerful universe, but the warp difficulties faced by the Tau here, which they haven't been able to overcome for 6,000 years, I think will really hinder their progress. I think the only chance that the Tau has is if they make very, very efficient use of their resources, which, to be fair, we know is pretty common for them. They're not scared to retreat from battle, for example, and manage to steal some Slipspace technology, because their very, very slow travel just isn't going to cut it in this matchup. I will say any planet that the Tau actually manages to land its troops on, they should be able to take. Their troops are just more powerful than anything the Covenant has to offer, and really the only thing that they will be able to do, the Covenant that is actually glass the planet, which I'm sure they would do if necessary. For the reasons that I mentioned, this one goes to the Covenant, and it goes to the Covenant 8 times out of 10. That is, of course, just my opinion. I would love to hear what you guys think. Make sure to leave a comment down below letting me know if you like this matchup, what you'd like to see next, if you thought I did a good job, if I missed something, anything like that. Also take a second right now to vote in the upper right hand corner and let me know who you think would win this matchup. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I know some of you are probably disappointed, but this video had nothing to do with Star Wars. Well, I've got a fun Star Wars Legends lore video coming for tomorrow, so make sure you keep your eyes open for that. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, guys. As always, may the Force be with you.